The LA Clippers have always felt like second-class citizens in the city of Los Angeles or Anaheim at some points to the Lakers. But this year, and as in the past really decade plus, they've been making their own way and especially getting out of the reputation that everybody knew in the old Donald Sterling days. And here with me to talk about the LA Clippers and their chances in the playoffs is longtime Clippers fan Sergio Arambula. I tried.
Yeah, no,
Arambula.
thank you, Earl. Appreciate it.
I almost made it. Arambula.
Thank you.
Sergio
Thank
Arambula.
you, Earl. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for being patient with me as I try to phonetically sound out your name, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, always, man, always.
First thing I want to ask you, how did you become a Clippers fan, and what was the draw, especially when you had the Lakers either next door or all the way in Inglewood at one time?
That's the biggest question all my friends ask me. Growing up in LA, Lakers, they've dominated this market forever. And I actually got involved with the Clippers was because back in the day, you used to give out free tickets to the games because no one would go. And that's kind of how I started watching Clipper games. It was back in the day, I think, with Pooh Richardson, back when the Anaheim days. But it wasn't until the turn of the century, right around 98, 99, when we got Lamar Odom, we got Quentin Richardson, Darius Miles. It was like the young and up-and-coming team. We had moved into Staples. And I really just kind of attached myself to like the young core, right? They were like the young kids coming up. And I liked the Lakers. It wasn't like I had any beef with them at all. It was just that something about the Clippers drew me. And it was also because I couldn't afford to go to Laker games. They were just more expensive. And I thought the entertainment value was still there, although the Clippers were awful. You know, we could probably spend $5 or $10 back in the day, and me and my pops could go to games, and, you know, I could still go and watch the Blazers or go watch the Knicks play. So that's kind of how I became a Clipper fan. Little did I know that we were that bad. When you're a kid, you just go there and kind of enjoy the game. You don't really think about how bad the team is. And then as I started growing older, you started realizing like, oh my, yeah, we are really bad. So that's kind of how I started becoming a Clipper fan, really.
What is your most memorable Clippers moment?
Wow. I got a couple of them, but I think the one that really stands out and that the one that's really redefined of who we are is the day Chris Paul got traded to the Clippers. I remember being in college. I went to school out in Seattle. And I remember getting the notification, and I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't imagine having Chris Paul in his prime coming into the Clipper organization that already had DeAndre Jordan and they had Blake Griffin. And I'll always remember, I believe they were both in a practice facility somewhere. I don't remember where exactly. And the cameras caught Blake Griffin, you know, super ecstatically excited. And I remember him saying, oh my God, it's about to be Lob City, right? And he coined the term. He was the one that coined the term. But it was just really between him and DeAndre Jordan kind of being so excited that they're about to get an amazing point guard to really delegate the ball around. And that just flipped a switch and it became Lob City, right? And for solid 2 to 3, maybe 4 years, the most exciting basketball team in the league. And I think that changed everything in terms of going from we might make it to the playoffs to we are contenders now. I think that for me was probably the most memorable moment as a Clipper fan.
I will tell you that, well, as a Wizards fan, and my biggest Clippers moment is the viral one. It's DeAndre Jordan's dunk over Brandon Knight.
Oh, my goodness.
That's the one.
Oh, my gosh. And the call, right? Ralph Lawler, who's just an amazing announcer. And we've had amazing announcers all over LA. I mean, Vince Scully, you have Chick Hearn, right? And Ralph Lawler is up there with him. The call he made when he dunked it on Knight. And Knight stayed on the ground. It was just like he really put him to sleep. And I always go back and replay it. And sometimes they'll even have voiceovers of Jim Ross doing the WWE style, and they'll drop in the coffin and you know, when Mankind gets tossed out, I think it was the Hell in a Cell match, and it lines out perfectly and that was another great, that was another one of the most memorable moments, but that was an amazing one.
That's all I think of. I've never heard any other version except for the one with Jim Ross, and that has pretty much been the iconic one, and how they ended with the look on DeAndre Jordan's face.
Yeah, he's like, ooh. I just remember, I think it was Karan Butler on the side, and he just like looking like he couldn't believe what he just saw. He like ran to the other side, and that was up there. And we still celebrated it, believe it or not. I think Twitter still does like an anniversary dunk of it, and it's always nice to go back and see what happened.
Going into the season, expectations after the disappointing conference semifinal loss to Denver and the firing of Doc Rivers and bringing in Tyronn Lue, what were you hoping for the Clippers to do, especially another year with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard?
Yeah, that was discouraging last year. Really heartbreaking, right? We had it in the back of 3-1, and in Clippers fashion, we blew it, right? We blew it. I think it took a lot of air out of our sails. We kind of were like, okay, let's maybe reset expectations and see what we can do. I think expectations were always to make the playoffs, right? Especially when you invest so much in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. It's just how high in terms of seeding and who our matchups were going to be. Early on, I think as Clipper fans, we know we were going to be up in maybe the top 4 seeds, and that's what we've accomplished. So at least that expectation has been met. In terms of how far we go, now that's a whole different question. But I think from the onset, we knew that we were top 4 contenders to be in the mix of Western Conference teams. Obviously, as a whole, we know the Nets got much better. We know the Sixers have been doing great on the East Coast. But I think in terms of West Coast teams, we were right there where we expected it to be. Now, in terms of finishing, that's a whole different question.
What's your most unique piece of Clipper-related memorabilia that you have?
I didn't have much as a kid. I remember we had, back in the day, the Beanie Babies were a big thing. So I remember I used to collect those little Beanie Baby Clipper ones because no one wanted them. And I believe it or not, I remember having, and I don't have it anymore, but it was an Eric Piatkowski one, which is who collects an Eric Piatkowski Beanie Baby, right? But I ended up getting a Blake Griffin jersey. I remember getting it. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately, either. But I remember that was the first big piece of memorabilia or just team gear that I had was a Blake Griffin jersey. Drafting him was a big deal for us. And right off the bat, he gets injured. And, next thing you know, it's like, oh, great. And Clippers curse again. We can't get anything right. That was probably the most memorable one that I've had.
Did you watch them when Dominique played for the Clippers?
I think that was just a little bit before my time. So I didn't get to see that. God, I've had terrible play. I'm not to talk ill of them, but it's just, we had Cherokee Parks, Eric Piatkowski, Pooh Richardson. I think Lorenzen Wright was still playing for us. Ron Harper, but Ron Harper, he left to the Bulls right after us. And that was, I think, the last time we made the playoffs in the 90s. It was like 94, 95. So that was kind of the transition over to the young Clippers, the really bad Clippers. So that was kind of my earliest memory, really.
Was there a point in the season you were worried that they were going to miss the playoffs?
I don't think so. I did think that we started off a little bit too slow. I think the bubble fatigue was still weighing on us. I felt like the loss against the Nuggets really shook us up. And in that drive to be great from the beginning, I think that you could see the way the players would play. It was still very lethargic. It wasn't sharp. I wasn't concerned about making the playoffs. I knew it was a long season ahead of us, and I know with the talent that we had that we were going to get there. I think mostly what I was really concerned about was the seeding, where we're going to be, getting in there as a 6 or a 7. Really was also concerned about load management. We've done a really good job of kind of doing that with Kawhi this year, trying to pick some spots here and there where you can get some rest. It was mostly if we can get everyone there healthy and clicking and churning at the right time. So it wasn't really ever a concern whether we were going to make it. It was just more like, how are we going to get there? And I think we're just hitting our stride now.
Who in the Western Conference do you think the Clippers match up the best with?
Oh, my. I would say in the first round, I would love to face off against the Blazers. I think the Blazers out of, I believe them or the Lakers, who are battling out to be a 6 seed right now, I would pick the Blazers. However, if there's any time to catch the Lakers in an off moment, it is now, just based on the injuries that they've had. I think they have also not found their rhythm. I think it would be perfect for us to meet now. And also, I think if we were to meet now, it would be at least nice, because we've always wanted to see the Clippers and the Lakers face off. Of course, it would have been great if they would have faced off last year in the Western Conference Finals. That is what everyone is dreaming of, right? With a shot to go to the finals. But I think it would be great for the city if both teams could finally meet up in the playoffs. But I think the best matchup, if we were to remain in the third slot, it would probably be the Blazers to get through. Now, in terms of second round, we're looking at the Suns at this point. I still think the Suns are a vulnerable 2. I don't think they're a true 2. So I like the way it's lining up for us, really, to get to the Western Conference Finals. Now, can we get there? That's the question, because we've never done it. So we'll see.
Who in the Western Conference worries you? I'm assuming that Utah is one of those teams. And is there anybody else if it is Utah?
I think what the Clippers have struggled with has been a team that's been consistent and kind of grab your lunch pail and go to work type teams. We had struggles with the Memphis Grit, the Grizzlies, right? Back in the 2011 to 2013 seasons, they just worked hard. We really struggled with the Spurs, another team that just went to work. Spurs gave everyone problems, though. And then this year, I think it's those type of teams that would once again give us a run for our money. I think the Utah Jazz are that team, worker mentality. And believe it or not, I think the Nuggets still would pose a threat to us just because of Jokic. I don't know who would match up with him. I don't think Zubac has the ability to do that. I think last year he just ate up Montrezl Harrell. And, Harold had a great season for us, but, it kind of exposed that, we couldn't match up with that guy. Obviously, they're missing Jamal Murray, which is a huge piece to their team. But I think those two teams, for me at least, would be the worst matchups, at least in the Western Conference. And obviously, if we were to get to the finals, the Nets, on paper, they look unstoppable, really.
How important is it for Paul George to get off the schneid? I know a lot of people laid the blame of the playoffs at his feet, and then his comments about Doc Rivers sort of set people off to say, it's the same old fraud George that showed up in the playoffs.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I do remember that. It is big, and he's developed this reputation, sadly, in the last couple of seasons. I think in the last 4 or 5 seasons. If we remember, he was great with the Pacers early on, right? He led them to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Heat. I think he had a great series, right? His coming out series when he had played with Hibbert at the time. I think they went to Game 7. They got blown out then, but for him to lead the Pacers at that point was such a big deal, right? His coming out party. I think in recent history, I think it's kind of like building up the yips, right? When you make a throwing error, it starts getting into your head. Next thing you know, you make another error, right? And then you become Chuck Knobloch all of a sudden. So I think that's it's more mental than it is physical with Paul George. And you're right. We don't know what it's going to be like, right? When the bright lights are there and when he needs to produce for us. It's massive. I think this is a make or break season for him to really kind of get rid of that reputation that he's built in the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of people also forget, though, that this man broke his leg in half. Right? I think a lot of people also tend to forget that. And when he came back, it took him a while to finally get his legs under him. Obviously, that's been a long time from now. But I think this is a pivotal moment in his career. And I hope that he performs. I think he will. I think what he's shown in the regular season this year has been MVP caliber-like. So I hope that it translates over to the postseason. So I'm really excited to see how he actually comes out and plays.
Looking at the NBA playoffs and the NBA finals, who comes out of the Western Conference? Who comes out of the Eastern Conference? Who wins? And in how many games?
Oh, boy. Well, I'm going to go with the easy one on the Eastern Conference. Like I said earlier, I think the Nets have too much firepower. And in the experience that all of those players have had, I don't think anyone will really come close to them. I think, maybe the Sixers will give a good run for their money. but not too much. I mean, you have, Kyrie who's won a championship. You have KD who's won a championship. Obviously, Harden hasn't, but he's as talented as any of those other guys, if not more. And then on the Western Conference side, now that is the big one, right? Obviously, we thought the Lakers were going to be a lot better. Obviously, the injuries were a major factor in them potentially being in the play-in tournament. And if the Lakers were, let's say, rolling at this time, I would probably say the Lakers just because of LeBron. LeBron's proven time and time again that he can produce and he can lead teams when it matters. And it's hard to bet against the man. But because of what they've been doing and how they've set themselves up to really face off a really difficult teams off the top of the jump, I really do think the Jazz are probably going to pull through, believe it or not. I think it's going to be a Jazz Clippers Western Conference final. And it's harder to go against my Clips, and I'm not going to be a homer because, I would obviously try to pick the Clips. But there's something about, I can't explain it. There's something about pageantry or history on your side. And history always repeats itself, right? It's kind of like, people blame the up-and-comers in European soccer like PSG that can't get through to the finals. And, you look at their history, it's like, well, they don't have history, right? Just kind of like an up-and-coming baseball team, and they go up against the Yankees, and somehow the Yankees just somehow able to pull it off. I think that's something with the Clippers where we just miss that extra something. I don't know what it is, and for that reason, until they prove me wrong, I can't bet with them. So I'm going to say the Jazz. I would like to put the Suns up there. The only thing with the Suns is CP3 himself hasn't had a great postseason run, and he hasn't proven that he can get over the hump either. And he's a little bit older, and the Suns were awful last year, so I don't think most of them have that experience. So I would kind of bet against them. So I would say the Clippers and the Jazz in the conference final, and I would probably pick the Jazz to get through.
It's interesting. A lot of people have been picking the Clippers, Nets, Clippers, Bucks, Clippers, Sixers, and things like that. Yep. And it's interesting. And like you said, I know you're a little apprehensive of going to pick the Clippers because of the curse. I'll have to ask you this. Do you feel like the curse has been lifted since Steve Ballmer bought the team?
There's still a stigma there, I think. There's still a stigma there that hasn't really left, but he's done a wonderful job, man. The guy's passionate. And there's nothing more like seeing a passionate owner. And that's what I really like about it. He's out there, he's vocal, you can tell he cares, not only about the team as how they produce on the court, but as the players, as just people. I think he really does care. And you contrast that with Donald Sterling, which was possibly the worst sports owner of all time. I think those years are not that far behind us. And it's still some form of stigma there, I think, at least for some of the Clipper fans that I've talked to. We still talk about the V. Stiviano days and how crazy that went down. And, I think what Ballmer has done has been nothing short of amazing. What he's going to do in the future with possibly a new arena in Inglewood, a new area for the Clippers to shine. And he's promised to not move the team out. A lot of people think he's going to move to Seattle because, he's Microsoft and everything. I think his commitment to not only the team, but the community and the players has been the best I've seen personally.
Wouldn't it be something if the Clippers end up playing a few games at the Forum and they're the world champs? Wouldn't that be something?
Wouldn't that be something, right? Right. They have the Forum Club too, and they roll out the old limousines to come through or something.
Well, before we wrap this up, Sergio, do you have any shout outs you want to give to or anything you want to promote? And do you have any social media that people can reach out to you, talk a little bit of sports, talk about Clippers and anything else LA related?
No, not really, man. I really don't. In public, I'm like Kawhi. I'm a very quiet man. But, I would like to give a shout out to Vinay for linking us up, Earl. He told me all about what you've been doing. And, I follow it. I love what you're doing. And, I'm always available to talk about sports. I love every type of sport. And go Clips, man. I hope this is the year. I hope this is really the year that gets us there, at least Western Conference final. I know that's a really small expectations for us, but I think this might be it. It's just maybe me being more wary of being a Clipper fan for so long that, I just don't try to get my hopes that high. So we'll see.